The tow truck's cable groaned as it latched onto Daisy's trailer, yanking it forward with a loud metallic shriek that shattered the calm of the morning. Inside the house, 10-year-old Joey screamed and sobbed, clutching his therapy dog's leash with trembling hands. I sprinted outside barefoot, waving my arms, shouting for them to stop, but the driver just shrugged and kept going. The golden retriever inside barked frantically as the trailer jerked away from the curb. My stomach sank. That trailer wasn't just metal and wood. It was a sanctuary. A moving therapy unit where veterans found peace and kids like Joey learned to speak their first word. And now it was being hauled off like junk over a stupid HOA complaint. Karen Worthington, the HOA president, stood arms folded across the street, smirking like she'd just won a petty little war. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would change everything. And by the end of it, her beloved HOA parking lot would become something she feared more than anything else. A dog park. It had all started peacefully. The mobile therapy trailer was something my late wife and I had dreamed up together, a space where our trained dogs could help people in the neighborhood, particularly children with disabilities and returning veterans dealing with PTSD. After she passed, I couldn't let go of that dream, so I converted a small towable unit into a cozy haven. Cushioned benches, colorful posters, a mini AC unit, even a dog-friendly sensory play zone. Daisy, our gentle retriever, was the star of the show. Every Tuesday and Thursday families came by. Kids smiled. Parents cried tears of relief. And all of it happened right on my own driveway, with full city permits and a small non-profit license tucked neatly inside the trailer's wall. For 2 years, no one complained. Most of the neighbors even volunteered. But when Karen moved into the neighborhood last fall, the vibe shifted overnight. She wasn't elected HOA president. She hijacked the spot through manipulation, whisper campaigns, and exploiting technicalities in the bylaws. Within a month, she was barking at people about mailbox heights and flagpole angles. When she found out about the therapy trailer, she didn't ask questions. She just issued a citation. Unauthorized mobile structure. Visual pollution. Commercial activity on residential land. She slapped the notice on the trailer like a parking ticket. I appealed. I showed documentation, licenses, letters from the city, even thank-you notes from local teachers. But Karen didn't care about any of it. She only cared about power. The fact that people gathered on my driveway made her furious. She wanted complete HOA image control, and my trailer didn't fit her aesthetic. Her words, not mine. Still, I figured reason would win. It always had. So I filed a formal request with the board to address it in the next meeting. In the meantime, I continued operating, quietly, responsibly, helping kids like Joey, who had gone from screaming tantrums to petting Daisy and whispering words like ball and outside. He was making real progress. But none of that mattered to Karen. She made her move early one morning. No notice. No knock. Just the shriek of chains and the rumble of the tow truck. I was inside prepping for a session when I heard Daisy barking like mad. By the time I ran out, the trailer was halfway up the ramp. Karen, wearing sunglasses and sipping from a ceramic mug that read Queen of the Block, watched from her front lawn like it was brunch theater. I begged the driver to stop, showed him paperwork, even offered to call the police, but he said he was just following a private tow order from the HOA. They had signed a contract with some shady enforcement outfit and empowered Karen to make towing decisions. The trailer was gone in under 5 minutes. Joey didn't stop crying for hours. Daisy paced by the window, confused and whimpering. I called the impound lot, and they confirmed it was there, but I'd need to pay nearly $2,000 in towing and storage fees, and it had to be moved within 72 hours or it would be auctioned. My late wife's dream, the trailer we built together, all the therapy tools inside, the special calming mats, the memory boxes for the kids, sold off like some abandoned junk car. I filed an emergency complaint with the city. They promised to investigate but said it could take weeks. That night, I attended the HOA meeting with photos, paperwork, testimonials. Dozens of neighbors showed up, some furious, others heartbroken. A single mother with 2 autistic twins spoke through tears about how the trailer helped her family. A Vietnam vet stood with trembling hands, saying Daisy was the only living thing that calmed his nightmares. Karen sat at the front of the table, unfazed, tapping her pen. When it was my turn to speak, I held up the license and city registration and asked her flat out, why? Why destroy something that was helping the community? She glanced over her reading glasses and said, because rules matter. Because no one gave her permission. Because this was a place for property value, not pity parades. Her words hit like a hammer. A gasp went through the crowd. Then someone hit record on their phone. Karen, in her power-fueled arrogance, just nuked her own image. The video went viral within hours. Someone titled it HOA President Calls Therapy Dog Trailer a Pity Parade. Local news picked it up. Karen's smirk turned into a permanent frown. She tried to claim she was misunderstood, that she supported therapy but not the way I did it. But it was too late. The footage had her own words, her disdainful tone, and the trailer being towed with a child crying in the background. The damage to her reputation was immediate. Still, I didn't get my trailer back. And the fees kept mounting. I needed a plan. Not just to retrieve the trailer but to make sure this never happened again. That night, while walking Daisy through the neighborhood, I passed by the HOA's parking lot behind the community center. A freshly posted notice caught my eye. I read it once, then again, and something clicked in my mind. My pulse quickened. I pulled out my phone and called Hank, a semi-retired real estate investor and local friend, to confirm what I suspected. He picked up and said the words I was hoping for. The HOA doesn't own that lot. They lease it. And the owner? He's behind on taxes. It's going to auction next week. That was the moment the real revenge began. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever. Daisy lay near the front door, ears drooped, head resting on her paws as if waiting for the trailer to return. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the impound receipt like it was a death certificate. The number stared back at me. $1,965 plus daily storage fees. For a non-profit trailer. For something that had never caused harm to anyone. The worst part was knowing that all the years of effort and healing my late wife and I had put into the trailer were being slowly dismantled by one woman's ego. I thought about how much joy it used to bring, how Maria would light up every time a kid smiled or a veteran finally spoke about what haunted him. That trailer wasn't a vehicle. It was a living legacy, and now it was rotting behind a chain-link fence while Karen sipped herbal tea on her patio like a queen after conquest. I spent the next day visiting city offices, trying to find a way to get an injunction, or at least a payment deferral while I contested the towing. The city clerk was sympathetic but powerless. Karen had technically used a loophole that allowed private HOAs to authorize tows under the clause of visual disruption. That clause was so vague it could be used against a birdhouse or a flamingo statue if someone felt strongly enough. And Karen felt strongly about control. While I stood in that line waiting for the clerk to finish her call, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Joey's mom. She wrote simply, "He's regressed. No eye contact today. Keeps asking where Daisy's house went." I didn't know what to reply. It was like someone had unplugged the emotional outlet those kids needed most. By the time I got home, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to keep begging Karen for permission to help people. I was going to find another way. My first call was to Hank. He picked up immediately, his gravelly voice crackling with interest as I explained what I'd seen on the notice by the HOA parking lot. He confirmed it. That strip of land, the very lot where HOA board members parked their gleaming SUVs during meetings, wasn't technically part of HOA territory. Years ago, when the community expanded, the HOA had signed a 30-year lease with a now-defunct development company. The ownership had since transferred through a series of real estate swaps, and the current landowner had missed several property tax payments. Now, the county was putting it up for auction. Hank chuckled at the irony. It didn't take long to confirm the details. The parcel was set for public auction in 10 days. Karen and her board either didn't notice the listing, or they assumed no one would act on it. Either way, I saw the perfect opportunity. I couldn't take back what happened to the trailer, but maybe I could build something bigger. Something untouchable. Something that made it impossible for Karen to ever erase Daisy's legacy again. Hank agreed to help with the financing if needed. He said he'd seen people like Karen ruin communities before, and he was tired of watching decent folks get steamrolled. I spent the next week quietly rallying support. I called a few families whose children had benefited from the therapy sessions. One of them, a lawyer whose son had overcome extreme social anxiety thanks to the trailer, offered pro bono assistance. Another, a local business owner, pledged a generous donation. Word started spreading, not through loud confrontations but through whispers and side conversations. The neighborhood that had been silenced by Karen's bullying was waking up. I avoided public conflict and simply told people that something better was coming. Meanwhile, Karen was unraveling. The viral video had triggered an avalanche of backlash. Emails poured in. News reporters called. HOA members began receiving complaints from residents. But Karen, in true authoritarian fashion, doubled down. She posted new HOA rules banning any type of outdoor signage without approval, tightened visitor parking restrictions, and began writing citations for everything from cracked sidewalks to mismatched fence paint. It was like watching someone drown while angrily splashing everyone else. At the next HOA meeting, she looked visibly rattled. Her hair was frizzier, her tone sharper. She opened the meeting by snapping at a resident for bringing a water bottle inside the clubhouse. Someone muttered, "She's spiraling," and I pretended not to hear it, though I couldn't agree more. I said nothing during the meeting. I just watched. Waited. Let her build her little empire higher and higher until the foundation cracked underneath. Back at home, I submitted the final paperwork for the auction. It was surreal. The same county office that couldn't help me retrieve the trailer now processed my bid to buy the very lot the HOA relied on. Hank helped navigate the legal documents and made sure the funds were wired to a secure account. We agreed to bid in my name, not his. I wanted this to be personal. I wanted Karen to see my signature on the deed when the time came. 2 days before the auction, Karen sent a letter to every home in the neighborhood. It was a dramatic screed about neighborhood preservation, image control, and how dangerous outsiders and unregulated activities were harming the community's integrity. She didn't name me, but it was obvious. She also encouraged people to attend the upcoming HOA barbecue fundraiser, conveniently located on the very parking lot about to slip through her fingers. The night before the auction, I stood outside my house looking at the empty spot where the trailer used to sit. Daisy nudged my leg with her nose, then walked toward the street, leash in her mouth. It was her way of telling me it was time for our evening walk. We passed by the clubhouse, and I paused again to read the auction sign one more time. It felt almost poetic. Everything Karen had weaponized against me, her rules, her enforcement, her obsession with appearance, was about to backfire in a way she could never predict. As Daisy sniffed around the grass, I imagined the lot transformed. No longer rows of blacktop and restriction signs, but green grass, agility ramps, benches shaded by awnings, and children laughing as dogs ran free. I imagined Joey sitting on a bench, hugging Daisy again, no longer asking where her house went. I saw my wife's dream living on in a way even she hadn't imagined. Tomorrow, everything would change. The sun beat down on the county auction office steps as I stood among a crowd of curious bidders, clutching a folder that contained everything I needed to legally take back control: bank documents, zoning approvals, and a blueprint that would make Karen's worst nightmare a reality. My hands were steady, my voice calm, but inside, adrenaline throbbed like a drumbeat. I wasn't just bidding on a piece of land. I was fighting for the legacy that Karen tried to erase. All week, I had kept my movements quiet, avoided stirring attention, and said nothing to anyone about what I was planning. But I knew the moment my name was called, the news would hit the neighborhood like lightning. And I was counting on that thunder to shake the whole foundation of Karen's fake kingdom. Just as the auctioneer adjusted his mic and prepared to begin, a familiar shrill voice pierced the air. Karen came rushing up the courthouse steps in heels that clicked like a warning bell. She was dressed in a blazer far too formal for the setting and clutched a folder of her own, flanked by 2 HOA board members I barely recognized, new ones she had installed after the last few resigned quietly from the chaos she kept creating. She looked stunned to see me, then furious. Her eyes narrowed. You. I gave her the kind of smile you give a person who already lost but hasn't figured it out yet. She stormed past and whispered frantically to one of the clerks, trying to confirm something. I didn't need to hear her words to know what she was asking. Is it too late to bid? The auction started quickly. A few smaller parcels were sold off first, each one going to a quiet investor or a construction company. The auctioneer then raised the file containing the HOA lot and tapped the mic twice. Final parcel of the morning, a .65-acre lot currently leased by local HOA for private use, located adjacent to the Windmill Creek Community Center. Starting bid $10,000. I lifted my bidder card instantly. Karen flinched and raised hers, a second too late. 10.5. I raised it to 15. She countered with 16. I went to 20. Her face tightened. The board members behind her whispered nervously, clearly unsure of how far she intended to go. At 25,000, I raised my card again and held her gaze. She hesitated. One of the board members whispered something again, probably a warning about budget caps or legality. But Karen didn't care. She jabbed her card up to match me. I knew what she was doing. This wasn't about the HOA. It was about her pride. She didn't even know the real reason I was there. She just wanted to stop me. She thought I was trying to punish her. And she was right. At 30,000, she tried again, but her voice cracked slightly as she called out her bid. I calmly responded with 35. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for someone to bail her out. But no one moved. The auctioneer called it out clearly. Going once. Going twice. Sold to bidder number 421. Karen's jaw dropped. I stepped forward and signed the paperwork. As I handed over the certified check, I heard her mutter behind me, "This isn't over." The next morning, I walked the parking lot alone, now legally mine. The place was empty, the painted white lines still visible, cracks in the asphalt showing years of neglect. I paced it slowly, Daisy trotting alongside me. I imagined every corner transformed, green spaces, benches, agility equipment, shaded areas with picnic tables, a small pavilion where therapy sessions could happen year-round. I thought about how Maria would have reacted, the proud smile she'd flash as she imagined kids playing safely, veterans sitting with dogs beside them, and laughter echoing where there was once cold pavement. This would be more than payback. It would be proof that compassion could triumph over pettiness. By Thursday, the first construction crew arrived. A small team of landscapers began tearing up the asphalt. Word traveled fast. Some residents drove by slowly in their golf carts, watching with curiosity. Others stopped to ask what was happening. I kept my answers simple. Building something for the community. A few gave cautious smiles. A couple brought coffee. One older woman handed me a box of homemade dog biscuits and whispered, "I always thought that trailer was a blessing." But not everyone was pleased. Late Friday morning, Karen appeared again, this time accompanied by the new HOA vice president, a man who looked more like her personal chauffeur than an actual board member. She marched straight toward me and demanded to know under what authority I was tearing up HOA property. I simply handed her a copy of the deed. Her eyes scanned it, then squinted at the bolded name printed at the bottom. My name. She shoved it back at me. "This land supports our parking needs. You can't just take it from under us." "Actually," I said, "I can." And I did. "You should have read your lease agreement. It expired 2 years ago." Karen's face went pale. Her voice trembled with rage as she accused me of sabotaging the community, threatening to take me to court. I calmly pointed out that my plans were not only legal but fully compliant with city zoning. In fact, I showed her an approved permit for public green space usage. She stomped off, barking into her phone, probably calling every lawyer she could find. Within 2 days, fences went up around the site. Not to keep people out, but to safely mark the transition zone. Signs were posted. Future home of Daisy's Dog Therapy Park. Grand opening soon. Families started showing up just to take pictures with the sign. Kids stood by the gate with their dogs, taking selfies. One teenager even spray-painted a mural on a plywood board, Daisy flying like a superhero with a cape made of hearts. The message was clear. This was something good. This was something bigger than HOA politics. Karen, meanwhile, launched her next move. She emailed a formal complaint to the city zoning board, accusing me of harboring dangerous animals. She posted flyers in the neighborhood warning of noise and dog waste issues. She even tried to get a petition signed to halt the project. But the community didn't back her. Not this time. People remembered the trailer. They remembered her mocking it. They remembered the video. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I heard through a neighbor that it was chaos. Half the room walked out. Someone shouted at Karen that they were tired of her vendettas. One board member reportedly resigned on the spot. Another called for a vote of no confidence. Karen tried to spin the situation, claiming she was only acting in the neighborhood's best interests. But by now, everyone had seen the pattern. It wasn't about what was best. It was about control. That night, as I stood by the fence watching the first patches of sod being rolled into place, Joey and his mom arrived. He ran to Daisy and hugged her tight, then looked past the fence at the field slowly taking shape. "Is this Daisy's new house?" he asked. I nodded. His mom wiped a tear and smiled. And just like that, I knew everything I had done, every bid, every legal form, every moment of restraint while Karen threw tantrums. It had all been worth it. Because the real foundation being laid here wasn't soil or concrete. It was healing. And it was permanent. By the following week, Karen had switched from desperation to sabotage. No longer able to halt the dog park through official channels, she began fighting dirty. I arrived at the site early one morning to find someone had scattered dead fish across the entrance and dumped a foul-smelling liquid near the fence line. The odor was revolting, clearly meant to drive people away or discourage progress. A few of the workers looked disgusted, but no one left. I filed a report, cleaned it up, and moved on. This wasn't just a battle over land anymore, it had become a personal crusade for Karen. She didn't care about parking or policy. She was losing control, and that was the one thing she couldn't tolerate. Later that afternoon, a city inspector showed up unannounced. He was polite, almost apologetic, as he asked to see my permits again. I handed them over without flinching. He reviewed everything and nodded slowly, then admitted someone had filed a noise concern with the department before the park had even opened. He shrugged and said the complaint was premature and baseless, but protocol forced him to follow up. I thanked him for his time. He leaned in as he was leaving and said under his breath, "Between you and me, we get these kinds of complaints all the time. Usually means someone's scared you're actually building something good." I watched him drive away, then looked at the half-finished agility track and the fresh flower beds volunteers had planted over the weekend. I wasn't slowing down. Karen wasn't done. She returned to her favorite trick, blocking access. 2 days later, she parked her silver SUV diagonally across the lot's entrance, blocking the machinery and deliveries. When I approached and asked her to move it, she smiled and said she was waiting for a friend and wouldn't be long. That was her game. Technical compliance with a side of disruption. She left the engine running and sat behind the wheel, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. I didn't argue. I just walked back to my driveway and made a quick call. 40 minutes later, a tow truck pulled up. The same company she had used on me. The irony made me smile. I waved at the driver and pointed to her vehicle. He nodded and got to work. Karen looked up in disbelief as the truck lowered its hook and began the process. She jumped out and shouted that it was her car, that she was HOA president, that I had no right. The driver calmly said the car was illegally obstructing active construction on private property. She screamed and tried to block him, but it was no use. Her precious SUV was lifted off the ground in the same manner she had once cheered for when my trailer was taken. The crowd of nearby residents couldn't help but gather. Phones came out. Laughter rippled through the group as someone whispered poetic justice. The next day, the video was online. Karen screaming about her SUV being towed while standing in yoga pants and a designer jacket. The caption read, "HOA president gets a taste of her own tow truck." It spread like wildfire. People recognized her, remembered the therapy trailer, and saw how far she had fallen. But if the video rattled her, she didn't show it. Instead, she turned to the HOA board with one last desperate attempt to reclaim control. She called for a special vote, claiming I had compromised the safety and appearance of the community. She pushed for a legal injunction to prevent me from completing construction. But it didn't go the way she planned. The board, weary from the non-stop drama, had started to splinter. Her hand-picked members were tired of public ridicule, resignations were piling up, and the residents were angry. At the emergency meeting, dozens of people showed up wearing custom shirts with Daisy's paw print and the words "Let the dogs run." When Karen tried to deliver her usual speech about rules and standards, she was drowned out by boos. Then came the moment she didn't see coming. An older man in the front row stood and raised his hand. He was one of the original founders of the neighborhood and still carried weight in community matters. He simply said, "I move to call a vote for Karen Worthington's removal from the HOA presidency." The room fell silent. Karen's eyes widened. She started to protest, saying it was illegal, improper, but the bylaws were clear. A 2/3 resident vote could remove a sitting president in a special session. The hands went up, one after another. Nearly every hand in the room. The final tally left no doubt. Karen was removed on the spot. Her face turned ghost white. For a second she looked like she might faint. Then, in a moment of surreal irony, she stormed out of the building, only to realize her temporary parking permit had expired. She left the premises to find a parking ticket on her newly returned SUV. A few of the neighbors clapped. No one stopped them. With Karen gone, the board reorganized quickly. They appointed a retired school counselor named Pam, who had helped many of the therapy kids in the past. She was calm, reasonable, and empathetic. Her first public statement was simple. "We're done fighting. Let's build something together." And just like that, the war was over. The next morning, construction resumed at full speed. Volunteers arrived with gardening tools, paint cans, and even spare fencing. Local vets brought in donated benches. Kids painted rocks to line the trails. Someone even set up a free lemonade stand and gave every dog that passed a little biscuit. A real sense of community finally returned, like someone had removed a pressure lid that had been simmering for months. People smiled at one another again. Conversations happened freely. The mood was lighter, warmer. As I stood by the entrance watching the fencing go up for the puppy play zone, Daisy rested by my feet, tail wagging softly. Joey arrived with his mom again. He held up a handmade sign that said Daisy's Park and handed it to me. His mom told me he hadn't needed his calming headphones all week and that he slept with a stuffed animal version of Daisy every night now. I crouched down and thanked him. He didn't speak. He just hugged Daisy again, pressing his cheek into her fur. It said more than words ever could. That night, under the soft glow of solar string lights we had just finished installing, I sat on a bench and looked over the land that once belonged to a toxic HOA and now belonged to something pure. The dogs ran free, the children laughed, and in the distance, the clubhouse that once hosted angry meetings now looked small and irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was right here. Joy, healing, and a golden retriever curled up at my side as if she knew the fight was finally over. Opening day arrived with a morning breeze and golden sunlight that bathed the freshly laid turf in warmth. The dog park was no longer a vision or a protest or a battleground. It was real. The fence was painted, the flower beds trimmed, the agility course finished. Benches lined the walkways, shaded by trees donated by a local nursery, and the old therapy trailer, fully restored and gleaming with a new coat of paint, stood proudly at the park's entrance. A sign above it read Daisy's house, in memory of Maria, who once dreamed of this very thing. The air smelled of grass, coffee from a donated refreshment booth, and something else too, possibility. I stood near the gate with Daisy sitting calmly beside me, her leash loose and tail wagging with anticipation. The ribbon cutting was moments away, and already families were gathering. Children in brightly colored shirts, some with therapy dogs of their own, others with service animals, veterans in quiet groups talking among themselves, and neighbors, so many neighbors, who once stayed silent under Karen's rule now smiling freely. A small local reporter arrived, her cameraman lugging equipment across the grass as she waved toward the trailer. She'd covered the original video of the tow and had been following the story ever since. She asked for a few words before the ribbon cutting. I kept it simple. This park isn't just about dogs. It's about healing, about community, about proving that kindness outlasts control. She nodded and smiled, then scanned the crowd. "Is that the kid from the video?" she whispered, pointing toward Joey. He was standing with his mom at the agility track entrance, beaming as Daisy licked his hand gently. I nodded. "That's Joey. He calls this place Daisy's backyard." The ribbon cutting itself was quiet and respectful. No big speeches. No staged photos. I simply lifted the scissors, looked out at the people, then looked down at Daisy. "Ready?" Her tail thumped twice. I cut the ribbon, and the gate was opened. A wave of laughter followed as the first kids and dogs poured into the space like water through a burst dam. Within minutes, the park was alive. Dogs chased each other through tunnels. Children climbed play structures shaped like bones. A retired veteran sat on one of the benches and took off his cap, wiping his eyes as Daisy trotted over and nuzzled his knee. I stood back, letting the scene unfold, not needing to be in the center. Just watching was enough. But peace never lasted long when it came to Karen. Just before noon, her unmistakable presence cut through the cheerful noise like a knife through frosting. She arrived in her usual fashion. Expensive sunglasses, blazer too stiff for a dog park, clipboard in hand, and a new pair of shoes far too white for the muddy patches. She marched straight up to the gate like she still had power, paused and scowled. "This isn't compliant," she muttered. "Where's the posted schedule? Who's monitoring for excessive barking?" I didn't respond. I just raised my arm and motioned gently toward the other end of the park, where a pair of uniformed city officials stood, sipping coffee and chatting with families. Karen's expression flickered as she saw them. She knew the permits were solid. She knew the zoning was airtight. But she still couldn't help herself. She walked the perimeter, taking photos of the fencing, scribbling something onto a notepad, and muttering every few minutes. At one point, she tried to scold a kid for climbing on a dog statue, only to be met with the kid's father, a man who said he'd been stationed overseas and used to attend therapy sessions in the trailer when he came home. He stared Karen down until she backed off. Then, in perhaps the most poetic moment of the day, a therapy dog being trained by a local shelter wandered up to Karen and lifted its leg right onto her brand-new designer shoes. The gasps and laughter were instantaneous. Even the city officials chuckled as Karen screeched and stumbled backward. She didn't even try to hide her disgust. She barked something about lawsuits and stormed off, leaving muddy footprints behind her like a trail of retreat. By mid-afternoon, the sun was high and the temperature perfect. Food trucks arrived, donating treats and drink. One local business passed out free dog bandanas with Daisy's logo. A band of teenagers played music near the far fence, and I heard at least 3 languages being spoken as different families shared stories, snacks, and dog treat. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt like a true community. No power struggles, no threats, just people, animals, and joy. At some point, Joey approached me holding a piece of paper. He had drawn Daisy in the middle of the park, surrounded by children and little hearts. In the corner, he wrote "Thank you" in big block letters. His mom said he made it all by himself. He started drawing every day since the trailer came back, she said. He talks about the park nonstop. I looked down at the drawing, then at Daisy, who wagged her tail as if she knew exactly what it meant. I told Joey we'd hang it up inside the trailer. It would be the first thing people saw when they stepped inside for a session. That evening, as the crowd dwindled and the last of the dogs curled up in the shaded corners of the park, I sat beneath a tree and closed my eyes. I thought of Maria again. Her voice, her laugh, the way she used to sit on the floor with kids, coaxing them gently into comfort. She would have loved this. Not just the park, but the fight. The proof that when you stand your ground with purpose and dignity, even the loudest bully eventually falls silent. Karen may have towed the trailer, but in the end, she handed me the very spark I needed to build something greater. And what stood now wasn't just a dog park. It was a sanctuary. A reminder that some things can't be taken with tow trucks or crushed under policies. Some things, like love, healing, and resilience, grow stronger the harder you try to bury them. The stars came out, one by one, as I leashed Daisy and took one final walk along the fence line. She walked slowly beside me, nose twitching at the grass, tail gently swaying. As we reached the gate, I turned and looked back one more time. The field glowed under the soft lights. The trailer sat safe and quiet. And above the archway, the words painted in warm brown-red "Welcome to Daisy's Dog Therapy Park." A legacy carved from pain. A victory claimed with peace. And not a Karen in sight.